And so because I wasn't a drinker, I didn't really enjoy being in environments where people were drinking. And yet in your 20s, it's sort of expected that that's what you're going to do. And at some point I said, it's just not fun for me. And one of the things about me is that I have a low tolerance for being unhappy. And I think it's good in a lot of ways because it gets me out of these situations that I don't want to be in. When I think about how much money I saved and really how much time I saved by not doing something that was quote unquote expected of me and considered normal and considered a rite of passage for college students. I mean, I literally went to one fraternity party my entire time in college. What do fraternity parties have to do with planning? Well, find out on episode 99 of the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. In the first part, I'm going to talk about what I call kind productivity, which is about being productive, but making sure it's aligned with your values. That's where the story about not drinking comes in. And then in part 2 of this podcast, I talk about the 70% rule for success. What? 70%? That's right. You can do a lot less than you think and accomplish those goals you've been putting off. All of this on the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. Hi, Alegre here, trying again because apparently I was muted the first time. Not sure why. All of the settings looked right, but sometimes it just happens. So thank you to the person who let me know that I was muted. Welcome. I am so excited to be here. It is Thursday and I am checking my audio so I can see what's happening. And I'm so happy to be here. Today is actually, this is episode, if you're listening to this live, it's going to be the 99th episode. Okay, the audio works. Yay. I don't know why. There was nothing wrong. So this is actually going to be the 99th episode of the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. I'm so excited. And next week is going to be, of course, episode 100 because 100 comes after 99. And I just want to give you a little preview of what 100 is going to be because next week I'm going to have 3 of my frequent collaborators on this podcast, Natasha, Angela, and Christine. And we're going to talk about dreams and goal setting because just this past weekend I had a dream of mine come true, and it was something that I've been working towards for the last 2.5 years. So I'm going to talk with Natasha about the process of getting there. And then my friends, they're going to tell me about a goal or dream that they want to work on. And I'm going to coach them through the steps they should take, what action they should take in order to work towards that goal. So I'm very excited. Episode number 100. Hope you can join me for that. I'm Alegre. I am the brain behind Beyond Your Wildest Dreams and this podcast, the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. And I am all about giving you the brain science backed tools you need to prioritize yourself and to prioritize your goals. And today, on today's podcast, I'm going to talk about 2 things. One, I'm calling it kind productivity. I don't love that word. So if you think of a better name for this, let me know in the comments. If you're listening to this recorded, I will still get the comments. So either way, I would like a better term than kind productivity. Hello to BP who just texted. Yes, I can hear I see the comments. So I am thinking kind productivity because what I mean by that is my goal is not to turn you into a productivity robot. I don't want to teach you just how to get more done. I want to teach you how to do more of what you want. So I will talk about that in part 1 of this podcast. Then in part 2 of this podcast, I'm going to talk about what I call the 70% rule to success. That's right. You don't need to be an A+ student to achieve what you want to achieve in life. And look, you're not always going to achieve things the way you think you're going to achieve them, but I'll get more on that when I start the podcast. But for now, I'm going to pick a quote from my little box of quotes here. And So I don't know who Virginia Satir is. If anyone wants to look it up, her last name is Satir. I'm so curious. So she wrote, ask for what you want instead of always waiting for permission. Oh my gosh. I feel I feel this quote so hard. If you have not watched my podcast on my burnout experience, just a quick recap. At one point, the two people above me, so my manager and then the VP of marketing, had both quit their jobs, and I was picking up the slack as much as was possible. And so basically, one person doing three jobs. Did the company offer me any sort of support in the terms of physical assistant? No. Did the company offer me any sort of bonus for taking on extra work? No. Did I ask for either of those things? No. So looking back, I realize now that that burnout that I experienced was as much a part of my inability to ask for what, not just what I wanted, but what I needed, what I felt I deserved, as it was for the company being completely clueless about how to support me. And I think this is something a lot of people struggle with for some reason. There is this mythology in our society that the people who know us well should be able to read our minds, or that the people who are managers should be looking out for us. And hey, it would be nice if those things were true, but I haven't found them to be true in my life. So, as a parent, I have been very, very purposeful about making sure my kiddo asks for what she wants. It started with little things, like when we would go to the restaurant, she would have to order for herself. And if she wanted more of something, she would have to ask the server herself. You know, it's so important to bake in these organic life lessons in these really safe, small ways, so that then when it comes to the fact where, you know, my kiddo is a teenager now, and there was a role that she was interested in, and yes, her teacher knew that she was a good singer, but I said to her, "Hey, have you told the teacher I want this specific role?" And she hadn't. And I said, "Look, the teacher might think you're a better fit because of your voice for this reason, but if the part that's really speaking to you is this part, then you need to tell the teacher that." And, you know, I don't know how your communication is handled at your school, but there's lots of opportunities for parents to butt in, because there's a whole website where I can message the teachers. Some of the teachers have, you know, these channels that are through a different app. There's so many ways to get in touch with the teachers. I could easily butt in and say, "Hey, my kid's interested in this role. Have you considered her for it?" But I'm not going to, because if she wants that role, she needs to learn to speak up for it. So definitely, I'm really feeling this Virginia Satir quote, ask for what you want instead of always waiting for permission. And if you haven't listened to the Burnout podcast episode, listen to it. It's really, those experiences were the impetus for why I started my business, Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, and this podcast, Harness the Power of Planning, because I learned that if I didn't prioritize myself and my goals, no one was going to do it for me. So I don't know if we should if we should blame fairy tales, or if it was nature or nurture, but I'm definitely really feeling this quote. Okay, so let's get into topic number 1. As I mentioned, I'm calling this kind productivity, but I don't think that's the best word for it. So if you think of a better term for it, let me know. So people come to me when they hear that I'm a productivity expert, and they say, "Oh, you must just get a lot of stuff done." And yes, I do get a lot of stuff done, but I'm not just blindly, I just made up a new word. I'm not just blindly checking things off. What I teach people to do is not just how to get things done, but how to focus on what's really important to you. See, in this day and age, especially with these things in our pockets, what is urgent can take up the space of what's important. And by urgent, I mean either external deadlines or notifications. I do not get any sort of text notifications because I don't want my mobile device to constantly be pulling my attention away from whatever it is that I want to focus on. Literally none. And people know, the people who need to get in touch with me know that if they want to talk to me, they have to call me because I do not see text notifications. So I want to teach people how to not just do things more strategically, but also how to decide what to do. And the best way I know of to figure out what's important to you is to be really clear about your values. What are your values? So, can you name your top 8 values? When I ask people this, they inevitably say yes, and they rattle off things like, I value human life, and I value, the right for people to do the things that they're interested in. And those are great. Those are wonderful, kind of like overarching values. But I'm talking about personal values. How do you want to live your life? And I know it's a very kind of ephemeral question. So, the best way I have found to answer this question, if you're struggling with it, is to think to yourself, if my best friend or my partner or my mom or whatever was bragging about me to someone, what words would I want that person to use? Like, oh, Thomas is so creative. He always shows up for people. I'm so impressed by how health conscious he is. So that's what I mean by values. What are the compasses that point you in your life towards the direction that are important to you? And so I actually carry my value cards. I have these, so I have my values on these cards, and they're in my planner all the time. And I have 8 of them. And because one, two, three, I guess there's 2 more still in my bag. So I put them on these really pretty postcards because I love this artist. This artist's name is Ernst Haeckel. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't speak German. And he's no longer alive, but his artwork just really moves me. And so I encourage you, once you're really clear about your values, to write it on something that you consider beautiful or interesting or sacred in some way, because these are the things by which you want to govern your life, and those are sacred. And so I'll just read my first value to you. My first value is for excellence. And that is both personal and professional excellence. And the reason why this value is important to me is because I want to show up as my best in all areas of life because that's who I want to be. This includes thinking before I speak, peak health and vitality, being an award-winning mom, friend, wife, daughter, creative, multifaceted, and well-rounded. Okay? So you see, it's a lot more involved coming up with your values than just saying, I want to be excellent. You have to know, why is that important to you? What does excellence mean? Because excellence to me means something completely different than excellence to the next person, right? These are all very, very personal. And this idea was actually born out of a story I once heard about Benjamin Franklin, apparently when he was about in his early 20s, apparently he didn't like himself. He thought that he drank too much. He was too mindless with his spending. He spoke too much, too loudly, and without thinking. And he decided that he was going to implement a program to become the person he wanted to be. And the way he did this was by identifying his values. I believe he had 13 of them. And he would actually rank himself every day on how he did on those values. And then he would apparently pick one each week to really focus on. And eventually, he did away with the tracking system because he became the person he wanted to be. And I remember when I first heard the story, I thought to myself, Benjamin Franklin, Mr. The early bird gets the worm, didn't like who he was. What? My ears perked up. And so what I would say to you is figure out what your values are and then do the things like when you look at your to-do list, if there's something you don't have to do and it doesn't support your values, maybe you let go of it. For instance, this was before I knew the Benjamin Franklin story, but at some point in my early 20s, I realized I don't like going places where people are primarily there to get drunk. I don't drink. Part of that is because I don't have the gene to process alcohol properly, and I get headaches and I throw up and I turn a horrible shade of red. And so because I wasn't a drinker, I didn't really enjoy being in environments where people were drinking. And yet in your 20s, it's sort of expected that that's what you're going to do. And at some point I said, it's just not fun for me. And one of the things about me is that I have a low tolerance for being unhappy. And I think it's good in a lot of ways because it gets me out of these situations that I don't want to be in. And so when I think about how much money I saved and really how much time I saved by not doing something that was quote unquote expected of me and considered normal and considered a rite of passage for college students. I mean, I literally went to one fraternity party my entire time in college. So, when you become really clear on what's important to you, it allows you to just let things kind of drop away. I'm sure my GPA improved because I wasn't searching out opportunities to drink. I'm sure my friendships, like I have friends that I'm still friends with, people from college, and I'm sure that it was because I was able to develop and nurture those friendships. I had time and energy to spend on other things. And so when I say kind productivity, by being really clear about what's important to you, it allows you to save your time and energy for the things that matter and to let go of the things that don't. Okay, so that was part 1 of today's podcast. If you have a better term than kind productivity, please let me know what it is because I don't feel like it's descriptive. And yet it's important to remember that productivity isn't just about doing more. It's about doing more of what matters to you. Okay, I'm just going to take a sip of tea here. As you see, I have I'm just going to show you all my beverages set up. So I almost finished my smoothie here because I went on a walk right before I started recording this podcast. So I had to have that available because I was a little hungry. And I have my tea. And then over here, I have my adaptogenic mushroom chocolate drink with collagen in it. Why do I have all these drinks? Well, the reason why is because if I don't plan to stay hydrated and get my nutrients early, then it becomes something that I am thinking about later. And I'll have to do a whole podcast on it because I could talk about it for a really long period of time. So let's just say perhaps podcast 102 or something will be about that topic, about using planning to make sure you're taking care of your daily needs. Okay, so topic 2, the 70% rule for success. So whenever I'm helping someone come up with a plan for a goal that they want to achieve, something that they're working towards, the point of coming up with the plan is to back into all of the steps that are required in order to achieve that goal. So let's just take a really simple one, which it's a simple one that a lot of people have, which is to write a book. A lot of people want to write a book. And this is not just people like me who write nonfiction books. A lot of people want to write a fiction book. So let's have as the goal getting the book published, because most people want to write a book not just to write it, but they want to publish it. So that's the goal. That's kind of the finish line. Obviously, there's still a lot you have to do after you publish a book, but the finish line, let's say, is publishing the book. There are so many steps before that. There's a whole marathon before that finish line. And before you publish the book, obviously you have to figure out how you're going to publish it. Are you going to self-publish it? Are you going to be looking for an agent and an editor? And then, before you get to that point, you have to have a really, really good, solid final product. And before you have the final product, you have edited it and re-edited it multiple times, probably. I know I do at least 3 to 5 times. And before that, you have to find an editor, because it's not just about reading and editing the book yourself. Having outside eyes on it is so, so helpful. And before that, you have to have a rough draft. And before you have the rough draft, you have to be writing regularly. And really, that's kind of those are kind of the simplest ways of thinking about all the steps to get to publishing a book. But the real activity you need to focus on if you want to write a book is the daily writing. Because only when you write regularly, and you don't have to write every single day, but you have to write most days if you want to get a 300-page book together. And if you want to get a shorter book, you still want to write most days, but maybe you take some months off. Like, for instance, I wrote these 4 books, and each of these books is about 80 pages. So altogether, they're about 300 and something pages. I wrote these 4 books by writing almost every day for roughly a year and a half period. Okay, so again, about 300 something pages, like the size of kind of a normal novel. So, but I haven't written anything since then. However, I did start writing a new book just a couple weeks ago. I'm up to about 50 pages, and I am writing almost every day. So getting to that daily activity is what's really important and what's often missing in most people's goal setting journey. People set a goal for themselves, but they don't ever back into all the steps that they have to accomplish, and then the little step that moves things forward every day. So let me just give you another example. My creative outlet of choice, I love doing this. I love writing my nonfiction books, but I also love to do stand-up comedy. I don't know why. I just do. I've always enjoyed stand-up comedy, and I do perform. And pretty much every day I'm working on at least one joke. I kind of can't stop thinking about it because I just enjoy it so much. And so I would say, for a comedian, that's the daily activity. Again, it's a form of writing. It's different than writing a book, writing a joke, because, they're smaller, but it's the same sort of idea. Like, every day I am working on some sort of joke. And I have some jokes that I've been working on for a couple of years because they're so hard to figure out how to make them just right. Like, there's something there, but how do I get to that nugget? So sometimes you're polishing and polishing and polishing forever. So anyway, helping people figure out what is that daily activity you need to get to. Okay, now you have the daily activity, writing. Okay, writing every day is not only, I would say, not realistic, but I would say that it's counterproductive. Because, for instance, if you're the personality type who is hard on yourself when you don't do what you say you're going to do, you might avoid setting this goal of writing every day, because you know that on the days when you don't write, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't write today. Ugh, I was quote unquote bad by not writing today. Okay. So let's just dispel that. Let's just take a deep breath. The only way to achieve these big goals in your life is to get yourself to do these little activities that add up over time. And the best way that I have found to mentally frame the idea of doing those mental activities is to shoot for 70%. Okay, so if I say that I'm going to write 4 or 5 days a week, and I do that 70% of the time, then I consider that success. So let's say I set a goal for 5 days a week, but I only write 4. The next week I write 3. The next week I write 5. The next week I write 3. It evens out to where I'm hitting 70% of that 5-day a week goal. Then I consider that a win. Literally, I consider that success. I don't say like, oh, I did pretty good. No, the goal is always kind of like a little bit of a stretch. Success comes with getting to at least 70% of that. So when people are setting goals, I always say to you, do not say you're going to do something every day. I mean, there are very few things I do every day. I can only think of one off the top of my head that I do every day, which is make my bed. And it's because I just love the look of a made bed. I always make my bed. Yes, I take my supplements almost every day, but there are days I miss, and you know what? That's just what happens. My skincare, I also do almost every day, but that's just because I love it. I just love it that much. Lemon water, I don't even track it anymore. I do it more days than not. So I would say never say to yourself, I'm going to do something every single day of the week, because it's just setting you up for failure. Because then 70% means you have to do it, at least 5 times a week. And that's just a lot of pressure. So I always say to tell people, like, if you're starting a new habit, you're starting to develop a new habit, shoot for 4 times a week. Because 4 times a week is you're doing it more often than you're not doing it, right? If there's 7 days in a week, 4 days a week means you're doing it more often than you're not. And if you're hitting 70% of that, some weeks you're going to get 4 days, some weeks you might only get 3. But the goal is 70%. And 70% is such a wonderful number because one, it is sustainable. As I said, to write these 4 books here, I had to write most days of the week for about a year and a half. If I had said, oh my gosh, I'm not hitting 7 days a week, I would have stopped doing it a lot sooner because it would have been so painful. I would have just chucked the idea out the window. But by adhering to this idea of 70% as success, it's doable. You're not going to be self-flagellating because, oh, I didn't hit 100%. You know, I find the older I get, the more I realize just how much of life is figuring out how to trick your brain. Because the reality is our modern life is very different from the 10,000 years of evolution that created the human brain. And we now have so many things to stress about that this brain was not designed to stress about. Like, this brain was just designed to stress about there's not enough food and I'm in physical danger. That's really what this brain was designed for. I was an anthropology student. That's what my degree is in. So I think a lot about how we were designed. Okay. The modern stresses of being hard on ourselves because we're not reaching our goals, this brain is just not designed to deal with that. And so that's why I feel like you have to figure out the tips that work for you to trick your brain into not feeling so strung out over these abstract goals of things like, writing a book. So create a goal for yourself. Figure out what the daily activity is that you need to do to support that goal, and then work towards achieving that daily activity 70% of the time, and you will have success. 70% is actually a lot of activity in the long run. You're doing so much more than 0, right? Because that's the thing, is a lot of people are like, "Well, if I can't do it right, I'm not gonna do it at all." Okay, well, the difference between doing 0 activity and 70% activity is huge. That's a huge difference. And it's sustainable. Okay? It's funny because I actually do the app, the language app Duolingo. And one of the things I dislike about Duolingo is how it pressures you to do it every day. And I still adhere to the 70%, even though Duolingo wants me to be on there every day. That just doesn't work for me. I just don't like that kind of pressure. Thank you for joining me today. I know it was later than usual because of the audio issue that happened, but I hope you found this helpful. If you are interested in taking your planning journey to the next level, I do have an on-demand 6-session course that you can access at tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand. So there's the QR code if you want to take the Harness the Power of Planning workshop. It breaks it down into 6 sessions, this concept and skill of life design and planning for a life beyond your wildest dreams. And be sure to check in for next week's episode, number 100. I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun. And if you are listening to the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, be sure to subscribe and give me a rating or a review wherever you listen. I really appreciate it. And remember, planning makes everything easier.